Hey fam, and we're back. I rambled on for 15 minutes to get to the beginning of this story, but it did serve a purpose because for all the things, as wrong as things had been for the past 5 or 6 years, I didn't even understand that I thought I took a full stop in 2018 when my quote unquote tower fell, and I shouldn't say 2019 because it was really towards the end of 2018 that things got real raggedy for me. And I'm gonna touch on that for a little bit. Yeah, let's go there. And this is Modern Mystic Messages. If you're just tuning in, we're on part 2 of my story. I guess I should have said that, but again, we're just flowing. So in 2015, I decided to this is crazy, and I hesitate because again, I do know that some of the people that are involved in my story still watch my platform, and I do want to make a disclaimer before I go any further. Anything that I say excuse me, about anybody in my story, I will not name names. If they identify themselves in the story, if they feel some type of way about it, that's a point of healing for them, because I'm not angry with anyone. I'm like Gandhi at this point. I bless those who brought me pain, for they are my teachers. I do understand that certain karmic contracts and trajectories and things like that are set into motion before we ever get here, and some of them change on the fly. And a lot of the things that I endured were things that I chose to put up with. You're going to continue to repeat your lessons until you graduate from them, period. And the largest controlling factor in any of that is generally yourself. Now, I'm not talking about children that are raised in really bad situations or whatever. I'm talking about adult decisions that we make, how long we let people use us, how long we let people abuse us, the types of people we draw into our lives in the first place, and it's about our sense of worthiness. But anyway, I digress. See what I mean? But these are the things that I had to come to realize, and realizations aren't always a clear overnight thing. So, that being said, once my life fell apart and I was at a standstill, what I didn't understand at that time is my life fell apart, but the people that were helping kick the slats out from under me, I brought them with me in the fall. Not physically, because when I left, I was living with my ex. We weren't romantically involved. We knew that I knew there wasn't a chance for reconciliation romantically, but I called myself trying to help do the right thing, to help work on building something for our child. That was a complete disaster. But once that tower fell and I sat in introspection, I was still in phone communication with that person, as well as 2 other very toxic people in my life that I didn't even understand how toxic they were at the time. Well, one of them I did, but I allowed the friendship to continue because they wanted the friendship to continue. A lot of emotional manipulation, all kinds of stuff. Super, super toxic. I don't really want to get into that. I will when I start talking about toxic friends later, a little bit. But again, I know this person still watches my content, and I'm not trying to go into that. They can't come reach out and contact me. I changed my phone numbers and all the rest of that. Spirit directed me not to delete these people off of because as karmic partners, they get to see this next episode of my life, and hopefully they'll learn from it. It's not a seeing from a nah situation. No. We both had an opportunity to learn from our dysfunctional relationships and heal and expand from them. I don't know whether they have or not, but I was instructed not to delete them off my media, so I'm learning to obey my spirit guide, so it is what it is. But a lot of those people, I didn't realize they weren't physically in my experience, but day by day they were in my ear. because most of the people in my life at that point were gone. I've never had a whole lot of friends and associates, and some of them were so obviously not in my corner and didn't feel good. It was easy to peel away, but these were like the last hangers on, and I didn't realize that they were the major part of the problem. You don't have to be physically in somebody's space every day for them to create an energy hiccup in your situation. You just got to be sitting there allowing them to trauma dump on you, and that's exactly what happened to me. In the name of quote-unquote friendship, I literally allowed 3 people that did not have their life together, that were not good people and didn't have sense enough to know they weren't good people, but they literally brought their dysfunctional, toxic mess to me, and I get to sit there and play armchair psychologist and listen to this in the name of friendship almost every day. And one of them I had a child with. So even though he had done me bad, even though I've lost everything I own in life twice at his hand, truthfully 3 times if you really want to be honest about it, for him agreeing to do stuff and contracting to do stuff, and truthfully as a parent of one of my children being morally obligated to do certain things, he didn't do them, left me financially in a really bad spot, and helped set me up for the fall, because as a co-parent of my child, some of the situations that I was faced with, he absolutely had the financial ability to assist with and had promised to, and according to even the courts was obligated to, and yet did not do them even after promising that he would do them, and left me in financial binds that started my world falling apart. I mean, hey, but yet I was still so emotionally stuck on the programming that we're given through society to forgive and forget, and I'm still stuck on that toxic masculinity. I don't need this and that and da. So I was so busy trying to absorb its responsibility for everything that I wasn't even willing to acknowledge those that were not meeting their responsibilities that they should, because again, women talking about what they don't need. Yeah, you do. You really do. But anyhow, I was still allowing conversations with these people, so I was angry and I'm frustrated, but in the midst of all of that, I'm still continuing to try to meditate each day. I wasn't getting down to what I needed to, or I didn't think I was, so it took some time. However, and again, I don't say this out of disrespect, but for me, the time of 2020 when the world shut down, it was a hard time for a lot of people in the world. That was a blessing for me. And truthfully, let me tell you a little bit about that one too, because that story in and of itself, how it rolled about. I left Sarasota in 2018, like I say, when the tower fell. I was at a point where I had one of the best paying jobs I'd ever had in my life. And I loved it. I didn't like the job, I ain't gonna lie. I loved the people I worked with. It was the best work environment I've ever experienced, hands down. I think it was a small office, so it's only maybe about 15, 20 people in the office. And truthfully, when you get that many people together, though, there's always somebody. But even the troublesome person or people in the office wasn't really a problem. But I adored my coworkers, had a wonderful relationship with them, beautiful South African brother and his wife. We had, and honestly, even to this day, I really believe if I had to go back and ask them for something, if they were able to assist, I believe that they would. Good-hearted people. I worked for them for about 3 years. And I had started, like I said, in 2017 or so, I had started getting number synchronicities and starting to hear things clairaudiently. I didn't understand I was clairaudient at the time, but I was beginning to shift. And I had reached a point where I knew I wasn't what I had moved to Sarasota to accomplish with my ex was not going to happen. But at the time, I thought, okay, I'm going to start my own business. And I was looking into drop shipping and Amazon FBA, things like that. And I was probably over realistic, but I had done a little bit of research and figured if I was able to save up about $6,000 or $7,000, I would have enough of a head start to be able to make a drop shipping business a go. That would be enough starting capital for me to go. I had a couple of niches that I knew would probably work, all the rest of that. So I worked with my ex again, leaning out on that limb, had an honest conversation with him. Things were going down, fairly well. I didn't think about it, but when I had come there, he was absorbing quite a bit more of my funds than I realized. But I sat down and was like, look, at this point in time, you're now working 2 jobs. I'm over here doing this. You're saying you don't need my money to make the household run. And he had been sick, so I had basically been carrying it as a single income for about 6 or 8 months of this last segment of time. And once he went back to work, he got a second job. He was doing fine, all of that good stuff. And I came to him honestly, and I was like, look, since I held it down, I'm going to ask a favor of you. I want to continue to work for about the next 2 or 3 months, save up my paychecks, and start this business. Cool. He agreed. Everything was fine. So I'm doing that, and I continued to rock on, and the time came down to wind down for the end of whatever, and I put in my notice at my job. With his agreement and his knowledge, all of that was fine. And even in the end of that, I gave my 2-week notice, and whatever happened, I wound up working an additional 3 weeks for them, I think, in order for them to find my replacement. It was a very amicable parting from the job. They threw me a beautiful going away party, all of that. Do you know the day after I quit my job and left, he walked away from one of his jobs to put me back in a financial bind. He got mad and walked off from the job. I'm like, okay, fine. I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to recover and recoup. I didn't get everything that I needed financially. I'm starting to pinch off of it a little bit, but I'm thinking I'm still going to be okay. And then whatever happened, and it took me a while to get to the bottom of what happened. Anywho, we reached a situation where he had mismanaged his money, and the rent needed to be paid, or we would be facing eviction. Now, this is not the first time he put me in this kind of situation. You would think I would have learned by then, but hey, when you're in it and your feet are to the fire, you do what you gotta do. So I put enough money in the bank to cover the rent, and got up the next morning to go deliver the check to the landlord, only to find out that whatever he had done, this clown had not only spent the rent money, but overdrafted the account by an additional whatever, so that when I put the entire amount of money in the bank to cover the rent check that needed to be paid the next day, the following morning that account was still $650 overdrawn. And I didn't have enough money left to pay the rent again and cover that $650 plus the rent again. Everything just hit the wall suddenly. He didn't have it. I didn't have it. We're getting ready to get evicted. So my friend sent me money for a ticket. I came to Atlanta. Everything was fine. Interestingly enough, my daughter, who by then was an adult, she was like 18, 19 years old, she chose not to come with me, and she stayed with her father, and they did their thing, and I came up here. That's a whole nother long story. I probably won't dig a lot into that, but as I went through the next year or so and began to heal, or tried to heal and put things back together, by the end of 2019, I found a little job here. I didn't like it, but I was working from home. It was a little money. interestingly enough, through all of that, I do have to understand, Spirit helped me understand and realize I survived an entire year in America with zero income. And I did okay. I mean, it wasn't fancy, but it taught me a lot about what I need and don't need and how to make do and how to be content with very little. So I can't even be mad about that time period. But I had just got back to work. We're in 2019 now. We're coming up on 2020. And right at that threshold in January of 2020, I get a very strong urge one day to reach out to one of my former coworkers. And I did. I reached out to her on Messenger, had a conversation with her, and I don't know why, but again, I'm learning not to buck the impulses. I asked her, she said something about, oh girl, we surely miss you here. And I was like, yeah, I wonder if, if I could even get my old job back. She said, hold on a second. And I didn't know what she was doing. And she was at work that day, and she was texting me. About 10 minutes later, she said, I spoke to Dion. He said he'll make room for you. Chris is now the new manager. Here's his number. Call or text him and let him know when you can be back. One text and one conversation at the right time, following my intuition, and I'm right back into, like I said, one of the best job situations I've ever known. Now, I got to get back to Sarasota. Well, it just so happened that my oldest daughter, who she stayed in Virginia when I left Virginia, but she and her now wife, it was girlfriend at the time, but they had moved to Sarasota, again, trying to work out a situation, a business deal with this same clown that bankrupted me, but we've known him for a while. They were trying to work with him. He left them financially out back. And that's when I began to understand. Well, I didn't understand at the time what was happening, but I started understanding that I was manifesting for other people, because when they were left financially in a position, they literally had a moving van packed up, ready to go, ready to leave Virginia, ready to come to. They had made arrangements to rent a house from a reputable rental company. They hadn't even seen the house yet, but they were packed up and ready to move from Virginia to Sarasota, Florida. And he was supposed to pitch in a scenario where they were going to start a food truck business, and he left them holding about $2,500 in debt that they couldn't deal with. And so my daughter called up crying, hysterical. She was like, what are we supposed to do? We got nowhere to go. We can't even have the means to get there, because he was supposed to. And I was like, I don't want to sound cold, but let me go do what I do. And that night I did. I went did some serious energy work, and their situation was worked out. They moved, all the rest of that. So now they're in Sarasota. They kind of needed a little bit of assistance too, because the scenario that he had set up, he backed out of. So she invited me to come and stay with them for a while. I moved there, got my job back. Everything was cool. And then 2 months in, 3 months in, whatever, we got to April, and the pandemic hit, and life shut down, and I was like, oh my goodness. But it got me back to Sarasota with family and friends, and thankfully it was a blessing for me, because in Georgia I had not worked enough time to be able to get any kind of unemployment benefits or anything, because the job that I was working was like a part-time gig. I didn't have enough rolling quarters in the unemployment system. If you're listening to this, if you're not in the United States, you don't understand what I'm talking about. If you are in the United States, you would, but I would not have had any benefits through the pandemic if I had stayed in Georgia. But by me going back to that job in Florida, it took me 5 or 6 months to get them, but I was able to get some financial benefit there. It took the pressure off, and I was able to spend that entire year focused in meditation and spiritual work, learning things, all of that. It was an absolutely beautiful time. And I'll tell you about some of the things that happened during that time period in the next video, but I'm going to pause it here for the sake of time. I love you, family, and hey, thanks for hearing me out. I know I'm rambling, but I don't know how else to do this, so this is what we do. I love you so much, and I'll be back in a flash.